Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Greg Kimball, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Captain Michael Manfield. We warmly welcome the family of Private Marlon Roxburgh Varley Stark, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During the ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the Australian War Memorial. Please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Marlon Roxburgh Varley Stark. Marlon Stark was born in 1891, the eldest of William and Sarah Stark's 8 children. His father was a bookseller in Sydney, and Marlon probably grew up around Burwood. He was an active member of the local cadets, spending 5 years in the junior cadets and 4 in the senior cadets. Stark worked as an inspector of state hospitals and asylums. In 1912, he married Caroline Campbell in Newtown, and the pair had a daughter also named Caroline. Marlon Stark enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force in March 1916, some 9 months after his younger brother Stanley. After a period of training in Australia, he left for overseas service on board the troop ship Benalla in early November 1916. By the time he left, he'd already had word that his brother, Lance Corporal Stanley Stark, had been killed in action at Pozières in August. Marlon missed his brother's memorial service by 2 weeks. Private Marlon Stark joined his battalion in France at the end of May 1917, shortly after the heavy fighting around the French village of Boulecourt. The battalion spent some time building up its numbers and training before it was called into the front line in Belgium towards the end of the year. In early October 1917, the 1st Battalion participated in an attack on Brutsenda Ridge. The enemy attacked at the same time, and in some instances the 2 attacking forces met each other in no man's land. The final objective was captured within hours, but with significant casualties. One of those wounded was Private Marlon Stark, who was evacuated to hospital with gunshot wounds to the abdomen. He survived the train journey to the coast on his way back to England, but died of his wounds at St. Omer. He was buried in the French Souvenir Cemetery at Longness. He was 26 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Marlon Roxburgh Varley Stark and his brother, Lance Corporal James Stanley Varley Stark, who gave their lives for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man, lying out at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they'll be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening.